10 extremely vile serial killers who roam free among the public. Most people would rather believe that the justice system would keep serial killers locked up at all times, until their deaths. However, it may surprise you to learn that there are many serial killers roaming among the free. Here's a list of 10 serial killers you could cross paths with and not even realize it. Number 10. Nicolai Zumagaliyev. If there were ever a real-life Hannibal Lecter, serial killer Nicolai Zumagaliyev would be it. His nickname is Metal Fang because of his metal teeth. Zumagaliyev had a single mission: to get rid of prostitutes all around the world. He began his murdering spree when he lured several female victims to an isolated section of a local park, where he would assault them sexually and use an axe to murder them. He then would eat their remains. He is claimed to have murdered and eaten more than 50 women. Zumagaliyev said he carved his victims' flesh and served the leftovers to friends during get-togethers. These get-togethers often took place after a murder. Most of his friends probably didn't know they were eating human flesh. His spree continued until Zumagaliyev invited 2 drunk people he met to his house, and they found intestines and a human head in the refrigerator, before calling the police right away. He was sentenced to a mental institution in Uzbekistan, but he escaped as he was being transferred to another mental facility. Afraid of generating fear among residents because of Zumagaliev's reputation, police made no announcement of his escape. Police were able to reapprehend him in 1991, where he served an additional 10 years in the mental facility. However, the government felt he'd learned his lesson and just let him go. It's not known where he lives today, but many suspect he lives with relatives in Eastern Europe. What makes it hard to identify Zumagaliyev is that he's extremely charming, well-mannered and good-looking. Nobody would know by looking at him that he had killed and eaten so many victims. Number 9. Issei Segawa. The world is full of cannibals, but Issei Segawa is extremely famous. Segawa came from Japan and studied at Paris's Sorbonne Academy to attain a literature degree. In 1981, he invited Renée Hartevelt, one of his classmates, to talk about their class poetry assignment. His intention wasn't to talk, but to kill and eat her. Segawa felt Hartevelt was everything he was not: smart, beautiful, and healthy. He believed eating her would allow him to absorb her energy. He shot her in the neck shortly after she showed up. Due to shock, he fainted right afterward. Upon waking back up, Segawa knew he needed to continue with his plan, eating parts of Hartevelt over a 2-day span. He was caught by police, trying to dump her body's remains into a lake. The court declared him insane and sentenced him to a French asylum. However, his wealthy father made sure Segawa was transferred to a Japanese institute. Paperwork issues led to his release just 15 months later. Segawa is a celebrity in Tokyo. He's been a speaker at many public events and has done several talk shows. He's remarked that the human body has a similar taste to tuna. He's been in several movies and written books, including one about Hartevelt. Segawa has mentioned on several occasions how he'd like to eat human flesh again. Number 8. Karla Homolka. It would appear that Karla Homolka had a normal childhood. She was an ambitious young woman who her siblings looked up to. This would change when she met Paul Bernardo, the Scarborough rapist. Bernardo was known to prey on young girls, wandering alone at night. It was reported that he had raped at least 13 young girls. When the pair first met, they were all over each other. It wasn't long before Bernardo would tell and tease Homolka about the rapes and how she was used goods, because he wasn't her first sexual experience. Homolka worried Bernardo would leave her, so she gave her sister's virginity to him as a Christmas present. Homolka's sister died during the act, after she choked on her own vomit. Homolka and Bernardo redressed her, put her back in her bed, and called 911. Homolka was torn about her sister's death, but for Bernardo, it only increased his sadistic desires because he got away with murder. It wasn't long before they began their rape and murder spree. Eventually, the serial killers would be caught after Bernardo beat Homolka. which forced her to confess the murders to relatives. The court determined that she was somewhat a victim of Bernardo's and sentenced her to 12 years in prison, which resulted from a plea deal. Homolka was released from prison in 2005, and in 2007, she, along with her 1-year-old son, moved to an unknown location in Latin America. Number 7. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez was one of 13 children from a prostitute mother who kicked him out of the house at the age of 8 after she found him fondling his little sister. A strange man picked Lopez up shortly after he left home, and he was sodomized during a 4-year stint in a deserted home. His sexual abuse continued at a school for orphans when a male teacher targeted him. Lopez eventually ran away. In order to survive, he stole vehicles and would sell them to chop shops. He would eventually be arrested for his crimes. When he was 18 and serving time, he was gang raped. He retaliated, murdering 3 of the gang members in prison. Perhaps this is what led Lopez to become a monster and kill more than 300 young girls in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. He attempted to abduct a 9-year-old girl and was captured by police. While in prison, Lopez confessed to a person he believed was a prisoner, but was actually an undercover cop, about the huge death toll left in his wake. In the beginning, he wasn't charged. The police could not believe Lopez's story until they uncovered a large grave which contained many of his victims. He served more than 20 years in prison, but in 1998 was sent back to his home country of Colombia, a free man. No one has a clue as to where he might be. Some folks believe he's back in Ecuador, where he said, "The girls in Ecuador are more gentle and trusting, more innocent." Number 6. Johanna Akana. Johanna Akana murdered a family of 3 in a cemetery in northern Sweden, thus claiming a place for himself in Swedish and Finnish crime history. Akana was 22 when he committed those murders. He had been released from the Turku prison in 1988 and wandered through Finland and Sweden with Maria Rautalami, his 21-year-old girlfriend at the time. On July 3rd, the pair arrived in the town of Amsel. Come evening, he decided to steal a bike. Sten Nilsson and his son Frederick, 15, chased after him and ended up in the cemetery. Akana shot them both dead with a shotgun. When Ewan Nilsson went looking for her husband and son, she was chased into the woods, where Akana slit her throat. He and Rautalami fled the country, but were caught a little more than a week later in Odense, Denmark. A psychiatric evaluation was done on both defendants, who were found to be mentally competent. During the trial, the pair blamed one another for committing the crimes, perhaps trying to cast reasonable doubt, but it was Rautalami's story that was believed. In a statement from a forensic psychiatrist, Akana had a psychopathic personality and was extremely aggressive. He received a life sentence for each of the 3 murder counts. Rautalami was given a 2-year sentence for being a complicit partner in assault and battery. She was released after just 1 year. However, Akana was sent to Finland to finish the rest of his time. He was held at a Finnish prison, but escaped in April of 1994, where he took a teacher hostage. He was captured and taken into custody a short time later, and the teacher was able to escape unscathed. He escaped again in 2002, this time being apprehended while traveling with his wife. When he went back to prison, Akana unsuccessfully tried to commit suicide. He escaped prison again in 2004, but only managed to be out for just 20 minutes before he was found, less than a kilometer away. Another daring escape occurred on November 28th of 2006. His 4th escape lasted just 2 days, before he was captured again by police. They raided an apartment believed to be his hideout, and he was taken into custody quietly. Akana was returned to a closed prison. During his 19-year stint, he was able to escape 4 times. And despite all that, prison authorities sent him back into society in 2008. Upon that release, Akana instantly stole a vehicle and drove it, as if he was the main character in a video game. He was arrested again, but released in 2009. It's unknown where he's living today. Number 5. Marybelle. Marybelle was born out of wedlock to a mentally unstable 17-year-old. Her mother, Betty Bell, would eventually marry her father, but this did not lead to a stable home life. Her dad was often unemployed and in trouble with the police. Betty would also leave Mary on a regular basis with friends and relatives. It's been said that Betty once gave Mary to a stranger she met at an abortion clinic. Even worse, Mary has said she was sexually abused repeatedly. Starting at the tender age of 5, her mother would force her to partake in sex acts with all kinds of men. Mary lived in the economically depressed parts of Newcastle. It was not uncommon for criminal behavior and violence to take place in those areas. She would often attack the children at her school, steal and partake in vandalism. Since she was deemed a show-off, people ignored her claims that she was a murderer. Mary is thought to have committed the murder of Martin Brown, a 4-year-old child. Before her second murder, Mary, along with her friend, Norma Joyce Bell, no relation, broke into a Scotswood nursery. She left notes that informed the police that she was the one responsible for the murder. At the time, police thought it was only a prank. However, on July 31st, 1968, the two girls killed 3-year-old Brian Howe, strangling him to death in Scotswood. According to the police reports, Mary came back to his body and used a razor to etch an N into the skin, but used another hand to etch an M. Mary used scissors to cut some of his hair off, castrate him, and scratch his legs. Since the girls were young, they had contradicting testimony. The exact details of what transpired may never be fully known. The girls went to court for their crime. Norma was acquitted, while Mary was found guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished capacity. The jury listened to the court-appointed psychiatrists, who said Mary showed all the classic psychopathy symptoms. Judge Justice Cusack called Mary dangerous and a danger to children. When she was 23, Mary was released after serving 12 years in an open prison. She was permitted anonymity to begin a life with her daughter, born May 25, 1984. Her daughter was none the wiser about her mother's dangerous past until reporters learned of Mary's whereabouts, and they had to leave home wearing bedsheets on their heads. Her daughter's name and location were not known until she turned 18, but on May 21, 2003, Mary won a court battle to protect her and her daughter's identity for life. This lifetime protection for anonymity is now called the Marybelle Order. A 2009 report states Mary was a grandmother, but there are no known details as to where she lives. Number 4. Louis Van Schuur. Louis Van Schuur made worldwide news when he was suspected of shooting more than 100 people while he worked as a security guard in South Africa. 53-year-old Van Schuur was also a member of the police K-9 unit and was employed to protect white-owned companies during the 1980s. Of the 101 people he is suspected of shooting, 39 of them died over the 3-year time frame. Some of the people shot or killed were burglars. The others were innocent victims of his rampage. All the victims were black. When asked if he truly shot over 100 blacks, he replied, as he sat in his chair drinking coffee, that he couldn't argue with the number since he never kept an accurate count. Van Schuur served only 12.5 years in prison. The country's most prolific serial killer was originally sentenced to 91 years, but it was commuted down to 20 years. President Nelson Mandela reduced the sentences of all convicts. Van Schuur lost a lot of weight, shaved his beard off, and worked as a cattle farm foreman in the eastern London area. He has yet to make any apology for the murders, saying he was hired to protect property and that's what he did. In the process of writing a book, he hopes he will set things straight. Van Schuur said he'd rather die being known as a crime fighter, not a serial killer or mass murderer. He said he was the product of his society. Van Schuur said he only killed people for his job. He was not a murderer. Nowadays, he works as an attorney and lives with his fiancée, Eunice. Van Schuur's daughter, Sabrina, was also sentenced to 25 years in prison for killing her mother. The murder was the result of being detested by those in her white community, and family such as her mother, and brothers for talking and hanging out with people of other races. She hired a black man to kill her mother, which he did by slitting her throat. Number 3. Arnfinn Næsset. Arnfinn Næsset, a Norwegian serial killer, started his killing spree in the late 1970s when he became the Orkdale Valley nursing home director. He continued his rampage into the early 1980s, until a nursing home employee discovered an unusual amount of a certain drug being purchased in 1981. The drug, Curacit, which derives from a poison, is known to work as a muscle relaxant. Næsset was questioned by police, since he was the man in charge of buying the Curacit. In the beginning, he claimed he was using the drug to kill wild dogs that encircled the nursing home. Suddenly, and without warning, he confessed that he had killed nearly 30 patients. He announced that he had killed so many, he had no idea who they all were. Because of the way the drug works, police were unable to investigate the earliest of his confessed murders. A 2-year investigation and a 5-month-long trial, where he faced 27 counts of murder, Næsset was convicted of murdering 22 people. Under Norwegian law, he could only be given a maximum sentence of 21 years. He was released from prison in 2004. It's been speculated that he lives in Norway under another name. Number 2. Lane's Angels of Death. Maria Gruber, Waltraud Wagner, Stefania Meyer, and Irene Ladolf are regarded as an unusual 20th century crime team. Dubbed the Lane's Angels of Death, the 4 Austrian nurses actively killed patients from 1983 until 1989, while they worked in Lane's Vienna. The nurses would kill their patients one of 2 ways: morphine overdoses, or forcing water into their lungs. The killings first started with Wagner. She was 23 and killed the first person with a morphine overdose. Upon realizing how much pleasure she got from acting like God, holding a person's life in her hands, she found the killings enjoyable. She then recruited both Ladolf and Gruber, who were barely adults, along with the 43-year-old Meyer. The 4 decided to drown their patients with water. One person would hold the patient down and pinch their nose, and the other would pour water down the victim's mouth until they drowned. Since the majority of patients were elderly and already had fluid in their lungs, nobody suspected much at all. After spending a short amount of time in prison for their crimes, the Justice Ministry in Austria released both Ladolf and Wagner in 2008. Gruber and Meyer had already been released years prior, many believing they took on new identities. While the women admitted to killing 49 patients, there is no known official death count. Number 1. Mitchell Johnson and Andrew Golden. Mitchell and Andrew are not your typical serial killers. Both boys come from a small northeast Arkansas town called Jonesboro. The boys attended Westside Middle School and appeared to come from loving homes. One day in 1998, they became famous for being the youngest kids in America to commit mass murder on their unsuspecting classmates and teachers. At the time of the killings, Johnson was 14 years old and Golden was just 12 years of age. The day before the shooting in April of 1998, the boys filled the Johnsons' mother's caravan with snack foods, camping supplies, and 9 weapons they stole from Golden's grandfather. They also had 2,000 rounds of ammunition with them in the van. That fateful day, the boys drove to their school and waited patiently for school to start. Once everyone had arrived, Golden pulled the fire alarm, which forced everyone out of the building. Once outside, the boys used the weapons and ammo they had stolen and began shooting. In the end, 4 female students and 1 teacher were killed. 10 others, 9 students and 1 teacher, were injured in the shooting. After the shooting, the boys tried to run back to their vehicle and escape. However, the Jonesboro Police Department was able to capture them quickly. The boys were the youngest in the U.S. to be charged with capital murder and first-degree battery. At the time of the shooting, their age did not allow for them to be transferred to adult court and tried for their crimes. They were sentenced in August of 1998, ordered to serve time until their 21st birthdays, the most time they could serve under current Arkansas law. This meant Johnson only served 7 years in prison, being released on his birthday, August 11, 2005. Golden was free after 9 years in prison on his 21st birthday, May 25, 2007.